Built by horse players for horse players, AmWager is designed for speed, power, and ease of use. AmWager brings CAW-style tools to everyday horse players, including Dutching, ABC Ticket Maker, and Pro Percent, an advanced betting tool that lets you assign weighted percentages and build multiple structured wagers with a single click. Every month, AmWager turns the odds in your favor with 0% takeout on select tracks. These promos offer you up to $100 more for your winning bets and giving you value for your wagers not offered anywhere else. Rated 4.7 stars on Google with over 200 reviews, AmWager is trusted by horse players who expect more from their wagering platform. If you're looking for better tools and better value, you need AmWager. Void where prohibited. For terms and conditions, visit amwager.com. Must be 18 or older, 21 or older where applicable. Gambling problem? Please call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE.
Welcome to the Sport of Kings podcast, episode 372, sponsored by AmWager. Go to amwager.com to see all their promotions, including the upcoming 0% takeout on win bets at Saratoga every Sunday in August. That's right, you can bet at 0% takeout into the Saratoga win pool, in which the CAW teams are throttled down. That is very player-friendly, so take advantage of it. As always, I welcome your feedback on Twitter/X. My handle is @Derby1592. That's @Derby1592. This week, I am joined by special guest Mark Ferrandino, a computer model-based player, for a detailed discussion about the Jim Dandy Stakes, the Arlington Million, and some other stakes races from both Saratoga and Colonial on Saturday. We'll focus on finding and exploiting value. We'll talk about our strongest handicapping opinions and how we might leverage those opinions using optimal betting strategies. Before we do get started, though, I want to take a moment, thank some people. I was at Saratoga last week at a book signing for my new book, Betting on Horses, which is available at betwiththebestmedia.com. I want to thank everyone who helped make it a success, including Oliver Cookson from Naira/Saratoga. He made sure I had everything I needed while I was at the track. Steve Bick and Annie Serling for helping me promote the event and the book. Marshall Graham for hosting me while I was at Saratoga. And for Clay and Corey and John and Patrick and Mark and many others who made my visit even more enjoyable. But most of all, I want to thank all the horse players that have supported my podcast and my books, especially those who stop by to visit during the book signing. You all make it worthwhile. You can't have much better than great racing, great weather, and great company at the track. And I'm really looking forward to doing it again. And an upcoming book signing at Del Mar on August 22nd, Pacific Classic Day. So I hope to see many of you there next month. All right. With that out of the way, I want to welcome Mark to the podcast. He's relatively new to the game, probably less than 2 years he's been playing, but he already had what I call a gambler's mindset in my book, and he had developed that in his day job as a trader, and he has used that effectively to gain early success betting on races. We're going to find out more about how he did that, so I want to welcome Mark into the show. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Hey, Chris. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, I am new. And happy to join your podcast. I've actually been following you on Twitter unknowingly until I met you this past weekend. My first weekend up in Saratoga, which was pretty epic, actually.
It was a great weekend of racing. You're still there, right? You're still enjoying Saratoga?
Still enjoying Saratoga. Here for another. I leave a week from Saturday, so I won't be here for the Whitney. And I got to drive my son down to New York to the airport because his mom wants him back home. He's been at camp and then did this road trip with me from Arkansas up through Lexington, up, all the way up to Saratoga from Houston is where we're from. So his mom's itching to get him back home. So I got to get him back home. But he had one of the epic heaters that I've ever seen. But of course, new to the game. But what his picks on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, just insane, man.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting your son. He's a great kid. And maybe tell a little bit more about that, because it was pretty fun to watch the next generation get really excited about the game. He had a pretty good time this last weekend.
Oh man, great time. So, I think we'll get into it, but, develop this model and, this dashboard for going to the track. This kind of, this last iteration seems to be a decent one. But we got there Friday, immediately, put in like a $36 ticket for the early pick 5. He hits that, goes into the late pick 4, hits that. Then Saturday, same thing, hits the early pick 5, the late pick 5, and then the early pick 5 on Sunday. And then second race in the Sunday late pick 5, the heater closed. But needless to say, his picks were welcome to the Ferrandino bank account, and it's he's probably hooked at this point. I hope.
If he's not, he'll never get hooked, because
exactly.
But it's great to see that he really enjoyed it. He was into the handicapping and betting, and he had a good time. And it sounds like you've had a racing centric road trip, so I'm sure he'll never forget this little summer jaunt with his father.
Oh yeah, it was great. Got to go to Land's End and see Flightline and see all the the stallions there, and we did some other stuff along the way. It wasn't only horse racing, but pretty horse racing centric. Obviously once you get to Saratoga, this town, lives and breathes it. And it's been great, man. It's been great. Love it up here.
Yeah, it is. It's a one of a kind place. If you're a racing fan, Saratoga is special. And if you haven't been there and you have a bucket list, you should add Saratoga. Get there at least once if you're a racing fan, because there's nothing quite like it. It's certainly not perfect, but for a horse player, for a horse racing fan, it's definitely a place that you'll enjoy, regardless of the weather, which doesn't always cooperate.
Especially with the way that Enron, the NYRA is now limiting the CAW play, and I know for me, I'm trying to focus as much of my wagering through NYRA, just because I think it's I know from my trading background how algorithms can come in and really kind of take some of the fun away from the individual, and I really appreciate that NYRA is kind of is taking measures to make it more a more kind of fair playing ground here for us little guys.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. Anybody listening to the show knows that. So I'm glad you said that, so I don't have to say it myself. But I will encourage people out there to play NYRA, because they are the only management team that's really making an effort to manage the CAWs. And I really think this is critical time. We finally have an alternative as horse players. We can play NYRA where they're trying to do something, or you can continue to do what you're currently doing and get raked over the coals by the teams. I don't understand why you want to do that. It's in your own best interest to shift at least some of your handle to NYRA. And if we do that, then collectively, if NYRA's handle, thrives, even though they're managing the CAW teams, that kind of eliminates that excuse that we can't start throttling these teams or it'll kill our handle. That the excuse the tracks are hiding behind right now. But if we don't, and NYRA doesn't succeed, then I kind of lose all hope, because certainly nobody's going to follow suit or do anything to try to manage the teams going forward. So I really do encourage people to do that. It's a win-win for everybody. And then, the product at Saratoga is good or better than anywhere else. So I don't understand, what would prevent you from wanting to play that. And we'll talk about some of the races. I'm not saying don't play other races. Like this weekend at Colonial, they got the Arlington Million card, and there's some good racing there. And I get it, and we're going to talk about those races. But, your core play, I think you need to focus where you have a fighting chance and a more level playing field. And right now, with the exception of a few pools and a few tracks like the wind pool at Del Mar, that means playing NYRA. So I'm with you 100% there.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
So why don't you tell us briefly, I think you've only been at this for, less than 2 years. And, you are having success, and you are taking kind of a modeling approach, maybe in a pretty quickly, because I'm not sure everyone will want to hear this, but I think some of the listeners will be interested. How did you go from 0 to 60 so quickly, and what are you doing right now? How are you approaching the game?
Right. So, it all comes down to, the tools now that are available to anybody who wants to learn anything in the world, basically. Like I'm a huge proponent of of these AI models. I think they're incredible for knowledge gathering and expansion. And, I do think, people have this giant fear of these models. And I don't think the AI companies themselves have done anything to really limit those fears, and they've probably made people more fearful. But to me, they're just knowledge harnesses, right? And if you if you want to play with any type of, particularly like these types of things where it's really, mathematical, it's building databases, like using the things that computers are really good at, which is like, coding and machine learning. Like these are the things that, the models are really, really good at. Just because, the models are, the different machine learning models are open source, and, you can access, I don't want to get too in the weeds into this stuff, but, your gradient boosting type models, those are all, easily transferable to horse racing. But, the key, of course, in any of this stuff is building your own database. So I think if you're talking about how do you get from 0 to 60, you got to build a database. That's step one. If I'm a trader. If you look at companies like, Citadel, for instance, or Jane Street, these, top level kind of algorithmic trading operations, they've got 4 or 5 PhDs that just focus on their databases. So anybody who's looking at doing anything like this, you got to make sure that you are clean with your data, garbage in, garbage out, right? So, and that's kind of the most important thing in building any of this stuff. So yeah, you build a database, you figure out which models, which model you want to run through experimentation. That's what I did. And then eventually you get to the point where, where your model has good calibration relative to the finish of horses in any given race. And then you can make your wagers on the basis of those probabilities that your model spits out.
So you have iterated now, and you've got a couple models, and you have them. You've created sort of an output that you use that kind of gives you a screen for races, but you don't have the model execute bets for you. You use that sort of inform your opinion, and you make the bets yourself. Is that a good summary?
That's a perfect summary, because no matter what, I've been through that whole, iteration where, there was a big trend. There's a big trend in AI, and people kind of building these agentic workflows where you've got multiple AI agents that will analyze a set of data and come up with opinions. And this is the reason why I'm I know for a fact that AI is not going to take jobs; it's going to create jobs, just because they can't look at something, look at a sheet and make inferences, that the way that a human can, right? So you've got, it can spit out probabilities. It can give you, it can create features that you can analyze. But at the end of the day, the art still, there's still an art in it, right? And that is like, reading, if you're reading the sheet or you're reading a model, it's the same thing, right? I think what the model does is it accelerates the ability for you to handicap at pace, right? I have a full-time job. It's not like I have time to go through, go through PPs and just like, analyze every race. This the system that I've built makes it, relatively quick for me to run my analysis and then create my dashboard, which is where, I center my handicapping.
And you use like the AI tools like Claude to refine your models and also to create the dashboard, right?
Correct. So I work in Claude Code primarily now. I've been through different kind of systems and different trends. Like the real big like moment for all this stuff, for building all these tools, was the end of kind of last year when Anthropic released Opus 4.5. And that harness was just super powerful. And that's when, another kind of open source AI tool called OpenClaw came around. And that was your first kind of like user-friendly kind of agentic, workflow process. And that kind of, I think that accelerated everything for me and made everything easier. Right. Before then, it was a lot of cut and paste. It was a lot of going on GitHub and looking at different code. But once that hit, and once Opus 4.5 hit, you can code everything through these harnesses. So yeah, right now it's Claude Code. It operates in my coding terminal, but you operate it in the same way that you would operate any other artificial intelligence, meaning you just ask it and give it directions within the coding terminal. So it's not like you're writing code. It's you're describing what you want, and then the harness is going ahead and building it for you.
All right. Right now, about 80% of the audience is like on fast forward, but there's 20% of them out there that really appreciate
I'm sure
that detail. But I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, or we won't have anybody listening to our discussion of the races. But the bottom line is, you kind of took your modeling mindset from your job and you applied it to racing, and you kind of clearly got hooked. From a betting standpoint, how do you typically, you've got your dashboard. Does it telling you how to bet, or just telling you opinions on races, or both? What does it kind of show you, and how do you use that to figure out what sort of races you want to bet, and if you're going to bet them, how you're going to bet them?
Right. So number one is like developing the features that get to a point where you can create a fair value for every horse that's in the race, right? So what my model does is that it spits out a percentage win and then a fair odds around that percentage win. So every horse in the field has a fair value, and that is the primary thing that I look at when I am looking at handicapping any of these races. Is what is the fair value of that particular horse for that particular race. So it's extremely useful when you are live at the track. it's, I don't have a model that, is, constant updates with the tote or anything like that. I have really no interest in kind of doing that. I want the dashboard there with me at the track, because like, I spend all day trading. So like, I don't really need to, have like this constant flow of betting in and out. I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in being at the track and looking at the tote board, and seeing how odds change and wagering appropriately, as the tote board develops.
So your model, kind of as I would expect, has a fair odds line. You're looking at the tote, and you can see where it seems to identify value, if there's any value. There may or may not be. And then if you do that, are you typically betting to win? Are you playing like exactas and doubles, or you're playing pick? I know you play some pick fives. I mean, so what's your normal way you decide how you're going to bet if you do find value?
Right. So the way that I like to wager is I like to always start the day with pick fives, right? And the reason why I like to do that is because I like to constantly iterate as kind of races go on, and kind of, calculate, we talked about it, Chris, like at the track is like, I do like to hedge into pick fives, and I like to progressively hedge as you go through a pick five. So like if you're 3 races into a pick five, that will completely change how I go into that 4th race and what I'm going to wager on that 4th race. And I'll even go as far as like, okay, the 3rd race in a pick five, if we've got a couple early wins in that sequence, looking at kind of value around that race in kind of horses that we haven't picked in that sequence. So that's the way that I like to approach it. It's like, you start with your portfolio, and then, as things progress through the day, I'll add to that, to that wager to hopefully extract value from every race. Right.
But to take that to the extreme, you're live to the last leg of the pick five. You're going to be hedging like crazy, right?
It all depends. Okay. Yeah, it all depends. Like if I have a really strong opinion, or the model has a really strong opinion about something, you'll let it ride, right? But if there's I don't know, it's like it's the same way that I kind of approach trading. It's like you look at a little bit of his feeling, right? A little bit is feeling, and you look at that tote board move in a direction, and you're like, oh, what am I missing here? Or that's a horse that was the next horse I would have picked in this sequence. So now I want to place a win bet there. That's kind of the way that I look at it.
All right. No, that makes sense. I know I was joking with you because I'm kind of an anti-hedger, but I don't hedge for a living. So I get it. That's sort of, you're wired that way. And
I'm wired that way. But it also gives you a little bit more action. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. And it keeps your head in the game. The one thing I'm a little curious about is how you structure your pick five, since you don't know the prices, where the value is. Are you just going off the morning line on your models? I mean, how are you structuring your pick five tickets when you don't know what the off odds are going to be,
Right.
Okay.
So I know over time that my top 3 picks in my model will win 75% of the time. Right?
And that's 3 in the terms of probability of winning. That's what you mean?
Correct. That's the top 3 ranked in one of my models will win the race 75% of the time. So, and then from there, right, I'll look at what my model fair value is relative to the morning line. And if there's a gap there, like let's say like I'm looking at where am I here? So I'm in Colonial Race 2, right? Which is just it's a 3-year-olds and up. She's never won $20,000 twice other than maiden. So it's just kind of like a normal race here, right? So, and one of the horses in there is the 4 horse, which is Goodbye Note, right? The morning line there is 12-1.
You're talking about Saturday come up this Saturday? Okay.
Yeah,
second race
Saturday
at Colonial. Okay. All right.
Second race at Colonial. The 4-horse in it, the morning line there is 12-1, right? My model has fair value at 3.9 to 1, right? So
that's pretty good. If your model's any good, that's pretty good.
Exactly. So like that's a horse that I'll put in that sequence. But that horse is fourth in my model, right? So what I typically do is if I'm structuring a ticket there, I would include those kind of big gaps in that ticket, right? And this in this second race, it's a very I've got like 5 horses that have relatively similar win percentages and fair value. So like that's a race that I look at my model and be like, wow, we've got pretty even. I see 5 of the 8 horses that have a decent chance of winning. One of those, the tote will typically lean towards will push towards the number 1 horse ranking in my model. But if any of those other horses win, you're going to get a number. You know what I mean? You're going to get some kind of odds there.
Right. So you're using the morning line. You have confidence your model is pretty good at identifying, narrowing the winners down. And some races it might, have a standout and maybe you would single that horse. And some races it might be more than 3 contenders that are pretty close. So, but you're kind of, and from a value perspective, you're looking at the morning line. If there's a horse that really stands out from a value perspective, you might, lean on that horse or something. But that's kind of how you structure the pick 5. And then as the day progresses and you get tote information, then you might make some additional bets in that sequence. And depending on how well your pick 5 ticket performs, that might dictate what you do in future races as well.
Exactly. And
so you can, so you say you do it all day long, but you're acting like a day trader at the track too, right? You're still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Just with horses.
Just with horses. Just with horses. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, it's not just my model that I look at, it's not just those percentages, like I've got, other feature sets that I've built that don't fit into the model, but are just like either that are confirmation signals or other signals that might be like, okay, I'm not going to use this horse in this, because the other features that I've built don't really give me.
So give an example or two. You don't have to talk about it all, but give an example or two where some of these other things that aren't built in the model, but you might, modify how you use the model output based on that.
Right. So I've developed my, my own speed figures. So like it gives, it takes into account, the different track configurations and the weather and wind, and gives me a mean kind of speed figure over the last 5 races across, each call. And that's one of my confirmation signals. I've got a feature that's, it's called collateral form, which, it is a, I can't get too much in the weeds here.
Right? It's a who beat 2 kind of thing.
It's a who beat 2, exactly.
Yeah,
it's a who beat 2. And then there's the other angles that I think most horse players use. Different kind of class things and other kind of features that I think every other kind of horse player looks at. But what I'm trying to do with those features is I'm trying to create features that are orthogonal to my model, meaning that there's not a good correlation between the model and those features. You know what I mean? So that when I do look at a specific horse, I can say, okay, well, he's got a 35% chance to win, but he's also got a good collateral form number, or there's another feature I use called, which is kind of like a next out feature, which is compares the horses that are raced against in the past and how they've done in future races.
I mean, like a key race kind of thing, like the past race was strong or weak. Okay.
Correct. Correct. It's basically a class measurement. So yeah, so I've got all these kind of orthogonal features relative to my main model that I use as a kind of confirmation signal.
All right. Well, let's put your model to the test with some real races. Let's talk about them.
What's going to happen here is that all these picks that come through the model this week are just going to be done.
They're not picks. We're going to get the strongest opinion. We don't have to give a pick. You can,
okay.
As your model does, you can put probabilities around it. There's no sure. What's nice about modeling and fair odds lines is it doesn't say this horse is going to win. It says this horse has a % chance of winning, right? And it's always less than 100 unless it's a walkover with one horse in the race. So that's one good thing. It forces that discipline where a lot of times people, just say they think in terms of black and white, and that's really not the way to think about any gambling game. You want to understand the percentages, and that's the only way you can really find value. So we'll keep that gambler's mindset in place, but we'll just kind of see how the model output, what it's telling you, how you would probably be considering betting on these races, and just have some fun. So we're going to talk about the Saratoga 9th and 10th. That's the Lake George Stakes and the Jim Dandy Stakes, and then we're going to talk about the 4 stakes races at Colonial. 3 are graded, 1 isn't, and they end with the Arlington Million. So that's 6 races. We'll try to go fairly quickly, but we'll go in a little bit of detail on each of those. So we'll start with the Saratoga 9th. That race is the Lake George Stakes. It's a grade 3 at 1 1/16 on the inner turf for 3-year-old fillies. The favorite on the morning line, there's probably 3 horses vying for favoritism. The 9 Lion Lake is kind of the experienced horse, probably the best proven form. But you've got the Brad Cox horse, Amber Glen, who's been very good, and the Chad Brown horse coming off a layoff, Deep Learning, who was as good as a 2-year-old. Those are probably the 3 favorites. Is your model picking those 3 on top? Does it have anything? Is that where it's going to lean, or does it find anything beyond those 3? What's it telling us in this race?
Yeah, the value in this race, right? So all those horses you mentioned are there in my model, right? But these, the percentages here are relatively tight, right? The favorite in my model is Amber Glen, with the fair odds of 3.6 to 1. I think the morning line's 5 to 2 there.
Yes.
The second choice in my model is the 4 horse Time to Dream at 5.1 to 1. And the value in here, if I'm looking in general at the sheet here, it is the 5 horse Ultimate Love, which the morning line's 10 to 1, and my fair value is 6.5 to 1. That's the 3rd ranked horse in my model.
So Ultimate Love would be the value horse. As a matter of fact, that's the value horse on my line. I have it at 6 to 1. Very close. I touted this horse last time. It ran a very disappointing race, but had some excuses. So I'm with the model there. What is it in the model that makes that it likes about Ultimate Love that might that some people would be overlooking if they're if that horse does go off 10 to 1? What is it?
Here's the funny thing about models, right? And this is something that I've also learned in my business, right? Is sometimes it's a little bit of a black box, right? Sometimes you don't know exactly why, right? But what you do in these models is that you build them up with a strong enough database that your calibration, you trust your calibration, right? So that's the whole idea, is that this horse with these features, my model has 46 features at this point. And it's got a calibration that's, very close to the end result, right? Or should have at this point. and it gives you that kind of percentage. Now, when I look at the when I look at that horse specifically, the 5, right? And this is a horse that's run. This is a race that's run 8.5 furlongs on the turf. And my speed figures, is it confirm it there that this is the Ultimate Love? Yeah. So the speed figures that I generate, it's in the top 4 of speed figures as a mean for this distance. So that would be a confirmation signal for me that I would be betting on this
fits
horse.
that from a past performance
Correct.
standpoint. Her best
Correct.
efforts put her right there. And if she were
Correct.
to improve any, she could certainly win. And that's kind of my thinking is, as a 2-year-old, she was very good. She's had 2 starts as a 3-year-old. I think she's had excuses in both. So, there's that potential based on her 2-year-old form that she could be as good or better than these horses. And this is the time to have her. If it may turn out that she's one of these horses that just doesn't progress from 2 to 3, but I don't think you can conclude that yet. And this is a time where you could get paid for it if she does progress. So that's kind of my thinking on that horse.
I've got another horse in here per my speed figures that I'm wondering about, Chris.
I have one more too, so I'll be curious. What's the other one?
The 9, Lion Lake. Do you have anything on the 9?
Well, the 9 it'll be vying for favoritism. So
it's 3 to 1.
Yeah. And it's stuck on the outside giving weight. So I'm willing to try to beat a horse like that. That's not really significantly faster than anybody else. No reason to think, there's a whole lot of upside. It's probably maybe the most established of all of them in here. And, she's got a rider that's not the kind of my favorite turf rider, Louis Size. He's a good rider, but he's not particularly good on the turf and certainly from an outside post. So to me, there's a lot of negatives. So that to me would be an underlay. One I'd probably want to toss. That'd be one I'd be against in here.
In my model, this is an 8 to 1 horse, the 9.
Yeah, I have it a little shorter than that, but very close. I like 7.5 to 1. So and it'll go off at probably close to that 3 to 1. So clearly an underlay, right? On the other horse that I had interest in but the value play is the 2-horse Star Actress. She's never really run poorly. She had on her dirt races, she was just constantly in races that had absolutely no early pace. Just impossible races to come from out of it. So I think her dirt form is better than it looks. And she's really bred to run on the turf. And her only turf try wasn't bad despite a less than ideal trip. So I think, that horse has a good post. And she showed that she can run pretty well even in races without any pace. And now she's in a turf race where, that kind of race shape isn't nearly as negative as it is on the dirt, even if they don't go fast here. But I think there's going to be some horses that'll be, making sure there's an honest pace. Usually, if Chad Brown has 2 horses in a race, he'll have 1 forward, and I think he'll have that 1 horse on the pace. And the 3 horse has some early speed. Lion Lake likes to be forward. So I think there'll at least be an honest pace, and that Star Actress could be the one. Still don't know how good she is on the turf. She's only had that 1 start. And I think she's even better on dirt than she looks. So that's the other one I'm interested in is the 2. What does your model have that one on?
That's interesting that you mentioned that horse because, while it's only ranked like 7th in my model, the collateral form is the highest of any horse on the board. Right. And it also has a note on my, annotation that it's been showing grit in previous races, meaning that it was close beaten on the line last time out. So that typically has ROI in a forward shadow experiment that I'm running. So so that's definitely a horse that I would look at my dashboard and be like, okay, this horse has the best collateral form. It's a price, and it's probably something I would throw into some wagers for sure.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like she ran in the Grade 1 Ashland on dirt in a race where there was no pace on, and She ran third behind Percy's Bar and Zany, two, top 3-year-old fillies on the dirt, in a race where it just really had no chance with it unfolded, but she still ran a decent race. So I think there's a lot of talent there. And, By Justified probably has been better on turf than dirt. The mare has some turf in her. So to me, that horse is interesting, with a good post at a price, 15-1 on the morning line. And I don't see why that horse would get bet down below that. So, but we'll see. But those are the two: Ultimate Love, Star Actress, that I'm kind of interested in from a value standpoint.
All
right. So let's. Okay.
I'm looking at my board if there's anything else. No, I think that's really
Nothing.
about it.
All right. Let's go to the. It's from a betting standpoint. It's probably not a real interesting race, but everyone always wants to talk about these 3-year-old races. The Jim Dandy Stakes, a prep for the Travers. There's 5 horses in it. One that really doesn't belong. Not sure why it's in. But 4 horses that are all, legit contenders. Renegade, the 3-horse, 5-horse Commandment. They've both been competitive in Triple Crown races. Neither one have a win, but they each have a runner-up finish. They'll probably vie for favoritism. The 1-horse Chip Honcho is kind of the standard. Steve Asmussen, constantly improving 3-year-old. Seems like he might have a tactical edge in here. He's the only one that naturally likes to be forward, and it doesn't seem like there's anybody, unless they are taken out of their normal game, that will be there with him early. So he seems to be a contender, probably still be the 3rd choice. And then Silent Tactic, as the layoff, is probably the question mark there. And he was kind of crushed by Renegade in his last start. So that he might have some upside and he could improve, but he'll probably be, a clear 4th choice, kind of behind those other 3. What's the model saying? Is there any value in here? Who does it think? Win?
This just seems like, like in these short fields, the market tends to, really line up with the fair value of my model, right? So it's got Renegade and Commandment as both kind of the Commandment at 1.9 to 1, Renegade at 1.3 to 1, Chip Honcho at 4.3 to 1, and then Silent Tactic at 4.1 to 1. So, and then of course, the asked and answered is, 99 to 1 in my model.
I was going to say 200 to 1, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
We can't say it's 0, because there's always some chance it can win, but it's pretty small.
True.
Yeah.
True.
So, but it's interesting. It has Renegade significantly more likely to win than Commandment. So that's interesting.
Yep. I don't, I think, I do think that this is one of those races where it would just be, a watch the board type race, right? And, try to find value somewhere as you get to post, for me at least.
What about
if I'm really on a pick 5?
Yeah. What about pick 5? How would you play this race in a pick 5? If you say you're gonna put together your late pick 5, what are you gonna do with this race? Because it's it's a small field.
Small field. It's tough because at least me personally, I probably would. In like a 5-leg pick 5. You know what I mean? I probably would put in more than less, right? Because you've got, I think, 4 horses here who, in my mind at least, legitimately can win this race. And the odds kind of dictate that. And maybe I would focus a little bit more on the 2 favorites, because if you combine their 2 percentages in my model, you're getting to 76% win percentage. That's pretty strong for picking 2 horses. So at the end of the day, what would I do, depending on what's going, how many horses I have in the other sequences? I'd probably take those 2 horses.
Would you weight one higher than the other, like Renegade, since it would be about the same price? And Renegade's more likely. Would you?
Yeah, I would take Renegade. Yeah, if I was down to one choice, I would take Renegade. Typically, when my model is over, 40%, it's a pretty strong signal, and Renegade's at 43% in my model.
Well,
So,
and all but his last race, he's looked like a 40% to win this race. But his last race, you got to kind of excuse that one. It was a weird race because they had all of a sudden there was this huge downpour right before the race. Kind of
right,
weather-wise, it was kind of weird. But, that was the only dull effort he's really had. Prior to that, he always had this, big move, and he really finished his races up. So if we see that Renegade, he probably deserves to be, 40, 50% to win in here. If we see the
right.
Renegade in his last race, he's probably not Commandment's going to beat him again, and maybe Chip Honcho, or so that I think that's the question you got to answer on Renegade. Do you excuse that last race or not? And probably you got to kind of split the difference. Well, you can't be totally confident he's going to run like he did before that, but you also can't say he's not capable of running back to what he was doing before. So you got to kind of split the difference, I would say, in terms of the way you would model it. But it's an interesting race, small field kind of race. I don't usually bet unless I'm playing the pick 5. And in a small field like this, for me, if I'm going to play it, I'm going to single somebody.
Right.
If the way your model sees the race, I would just single Renegade because he's probably not going to be the favorite, but you think he's the most likely winner, and that's a horse that's worth singling to me.
Right.
So that's kind of how I approach it. But I'm different than you. I'm not. I don't have to play it. You're more of a pick 5 player than you're gonna. That's sort of your foundation play, and then you're kind of playing off that for the rest of the sequence. I don't play the pick 5 unless I just really like it. So the only way I'd play the pick 5 in this race would be if I liked some of the other races, and if that were the case, and I had the opinion that your model has, then I would just be singling Renegade. For me, I don't have a strong opinion here. I think Renegade, Chip Honcho, and Commandment are all about equally likely to win, actually. I can't really decide because I do think Chip Honcho, he's probably not as good as the other two, but he's got a real tactical advantage.
Yes.
He should be able to just settle into a nice rhythm and, be able to run his best race, saving ground all the way around. Pretty stress-free unless somebody decides to push him early, but that'll take them out of their game. And they're probably going to be reluctant to do that. So, it's it's going to be a tactical race because it's going to be a rider race. But if nobody gets aggressive, which is kind of my default mode with jockeys nowadays, they typically don't want to be accused of being overly aggressive and getting their horse beat. That means Chip Honcho could be tough to run down late. And plus, Steve Asmussen horses, 3-year-olds, they just steadily improve throughout their careers.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. And, if, another feature of my model is measuring their form, right? And the only horse on this board that I have as improving is Chip Honcho. Everyone else is steady. Commandment is steady, and the only one improving is Chip Honcho. So it's interesting.
Yeah, this race had been a couple months ago. Chip Honcho was definitely behind these, and if it had been a full field with other pace in the race, I wouldn't give Chip Honcho any chance at all. But we're 2 months later. He's gotten better. The other ones, I don't know if they've gotten better or not, but he's kind of the standard Asmussen improving horse. He's in a race where he could control it. So I just don't think, a lot of those factors, it's not always the most talented horse that wins. A lot of times it's just the way the race unfolds. And unless there's something surprising, at least in my mind would be surprising, Chip Honcho is going to get a really, really good trip. And he's not that far behind these horses. And he's, like you said, I agree. He's the one most likely to continue to make incremental improvement in here, especially if he gets the perfect trip that he'd like to get.
Yep. That's something actually that I've really struggled with. You mentioned, like pace shape, right? And how to model that, because it's actually quite a difficult kind of mathematical problem to try to solve. I've been through
funny.
It's like really, really hard to solve. Really, really hard to solve. And, all I've been able to do really is to kind of like map it out between, kind of three different scenarios. And even then, like my brain, in order to kind of get that, right, it's been quite difficult. And I think that's like what a real experienced handicapper can do, kind of like, naturally, that they kind of will look at the PPs and be like, like they can almost like visualize how the pace is going to go. And I'm certainly not at that point yet. And it's been very hard for me to model that, for me to figure it out.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because in my book, Betting on Horses, got to always plug it, betwiththebestmedia.com, I have a section on, speed and pace. And I talk about this never-ending search of how I compare it to trying to find the theory that combines quantum mechanics with the theory of relativity. How to combine speed and pace to really understand the total performance of a horse. I talk about it in those terms in the book, so it's funny you say that. You're not the only one that struggled with this.
You joke about that. But I have actually fed like different quantum theories to my model to try to come up with a better pace modeling. And it, like I said, it still struggles. Like I guess maybe. Well,
Albert Einstein struggled with it, so it's not surprising that Claude is struggling with that. All right, well, let's move on. But that was a lot of talk for a race that probably neither one of us are going to make a bet on, except for you in the Big Five.
Exactly.
But it's a good discussion. So let's shift gears. We're going to move to the probably the best card for the day on Saturday. That's Colonial Downs. It's their big day. It's Arlington Million Day. I'm going to try to avoid saying anything snide about how Churchill Downs destroyed Arlington Park, but I had to slip that in anyway. It was only the most nicest racing plant in the country. It got torn down, but
and now they're not even building the stadium there, right?
No,
isn't that?
No, it's I don't. I had to slip that in. So. At
least with Hollywood Park, you got SoFi Stadium.
You got SoFi Stadium, but still, yeah, and that wasn't the exactly. You're right. You got something to show for it. But anyway, let's talk about the races. We're going to do races 8, 9, 10, 11. 8th is the only non-graded stakes, the Van Clief Stakes, 5.5 furlongs on the turf, 3-year-olds and up. These turf sprints, I love them. A lot of people hate them. In this race, the favorites are on the outside, which is always a little dicey in a turf sprint. The 12, Governor Sam, and the 13, My Boy Prince. What's the model think about them? Does it have any alternatives that it's leading you towards in the Colonial 8th?
I got a big underdog in here that is third in my model. But as you said, My Boy Prince and Governor Sam, they're the top two choices in the model. My Boy Prince is a clear favorite per the model. And every other feature I look at here on my board would lead me towards the 13. The kind of outlier horse in here is the 5 horse. It's Bourbon 30. Which the morning line has at 20-1, and my model has at 4.3-1.
Whoa!
And if I look at the other kind of like confirmation signals in here, including collateral form, and I'll look at my speed figures here quickly. Yep, the speed figures line up for a competitive horse, kind of middle of the range. But yeah, that's the big underdog that the model likes.
Wow, that is, and it likes it a lot. I mean, gives it a reasonably high chance of winning at a big price. Those are the kind of horses I like. That's not one I had flagged as being, really a live price, but I really like the way so when you get a horse like that where, it's it's obviously, massive value. It's got a pretty good chance of winning. You said, what was it, fair odds? You said like 4.5 to 1 or something?
4.3 to 1. Yeah.
Yeah. So, 9 to 2 horse that's going to go off at 20 to 1, maybe, higher. So how do you bet that? Not in the pick 5, but how would you bet that outside the pick 5, or would you bet that outside the pick 5?
I definitely would bet it outside the pick 5. Obviously responding to the tote, but I would go across the board on that horse because
do you keep numbers on place and show ROI versus win ROI? Because I always preach don't play place and show, but I'm curious, do you keep records of?
Yeah, I think if there's like the way that I look at it is if it's above 5 to 1, but not above, but below 10 to 1, it'll be a win place. If it's 20 to 1, like this horse is, I would probably do win place show. But maybe that's the wrong approach.
Well, yeah. Well, so I would say, if you think My Boy Prince is, clearly the one you're worried about beating you, if your horse runs well, wouldn't you be better off just playing exactas under My Boy Prince, or maybe a couple other contenders rather than making a place bet where, you're
probably right. And this is kind of goes back to, kind of my learning process here and trying to understand where there's value in the pools. And, I probably, a big gap in my knowledge here is how these pools develop. And I think, talking to you and talking to everybody else that, I'm meeting here along the way, that'll probably, focus my attention a little bit more on those pools. Right.
Yeah. And again, in my book, I go into a lot about, how to, bet vertically and, about win, place, and show. And typically, I'm not saying in all cases, place and show bets aren't the way to go. If you have any other opinion in the race, I mean, if you think every other horse is equally likely to win, even then you probably shouldn't be betting in place, because your place price gets impacted by, and show prices get impacted by the other horses that finish in the race. And, if the favorite gets in there, it's going to kill your place and show prices. So, if you think the favorite's not going to win, then you probably ought to be playing exactas that don't include the favorite. If you think the favorite is very likely to win, then you probably ought to just be playing underneath the favorite. So anyway, that's something to think about. Probably better ways to play than place and show. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll try that this weekend. There we go.
Yeah. We can talk about it some more. And like I said, in the book, I go in a lot of detail about some betting strategies, both vertical and horizontal, that I think that's where, especially someone like you who's analytical, so you can understand probability, understand value. The natural tendency is to focus on the analysis side and predicting outcomes, which is really important. You want to be good at that. But where most people can improve is on the other aspect, which is exploiting whatever value you find in the wagering pools and how you bet. And that's why I usually recommend that people have even been doing it for a while. That's probably where you have the biggest chance to improve your results is getting a little better at the betting, because you're probably already reasonably good on the opinion, and clearly you're already very good at predicting outcomes. Now you just want to maybe focus more about how can you get better at exploiting that value once you identify it.
Yep, that's definitely a blind spot for me, for sure. And it's something that, even when I'm, interacting with the harnesses, they'll be like, this is where you need to spend your time figuring out how to wager. So
listen to them. There's wisdom there. Yes.
Well, I'd rather listen to you, but yeah,
okay.
Sure.
All right. Well, read my book. Yeah. You'll be getting a copy soon.
I'm waiting for my copy, man. I get that copy, once I get back to Houston, don't worry.
We can talk
I'll do my
about
book
it.
Report after that.
All right. We can talk about it after you get a chance to read it. Because I think
who else do you like in here, Chris?
Who else do I like in here? Well, there's two horses I like in here. I kind of like the engine and the caboose. First I'll go with the engine. The 6-horse Victory Achieved. That horse I like It had started its career with a couple of turf races, which weren't bad, but it didn't have the greatest trips. Still ran pretty well, and then they shifted. Then they shipped out to Woodbine, and they were on the Synth, and the horse was really good on the Synth. And then something went wrong. But they brought it back last year. They brought it back this year, and it's run really well on Synth in 2 races. Now they finally get it back on turf, and I think it will run perfectly well on turf. And I think there's a good chance it could go wire to wire in here. There's one other speed horse. That's the 10 horse, Nothing Better. But I think the 6 horse, the stable made of the favorite, My Boy Prince. So I have a feeling that they'll send. That doesn't mean the horse is just a rabbit in there to set the pace, but it means that they want to make sure there's an honest pace for My Boy Prince. And I think he might end up just going wire to wire at a big price. So to me, 30 to 1 on the morning line, if that holds up, there's huge value with that horse. Now he could end up, maybe he's not as quick as Nothing Better, or they get into a duel or something, and but at 30 to 1, I think there's a good chance that maybe he can get out front, or if he doesn't get out in front, he just sits second behind Nothing Better, and they don't go too fast, and he's the best of the speed. So for me, there's a lot of value with Victory Achieved. And the caboose I like is the 7 horse Witty. I'm thinking of the Whitney in my head. Witty. I've always liked this horse. I think he's the best closer in the race. He's probably one of the best closing turf sprinters there is. He's getting a little old, but he's still got a good kick in him, and he's run well before at Colonial. And I think he's the best of the closers. And if he is double-digit odds like the morning line has, I like him. So those are the 2 I would key around. I'm going to try to beat the favorites. My Boy Prince is good, and I've touted him before. In fact, for a long time, I kept saying if they would cut him back in distance, he's a sprinter, and he's much better sprinting. They kept running him in routes, even like 1.5 miles, and they finally just decided to let him sprint, and he's been really, really good. So, he is the best horse probably, but he's stuck outside. He's spotting weight to most of the other horses. I just think he's vulnerable. So I'm going to kind of get, Victory Achieved and Witty, and a couple other long shots. The 8 and the 9, Izzy Vunga Vunga, and the 8 Karime Pass, I guess is how you say it. I think they're both kind of fit in here. There's no reason why they couldn't hit the board. So I'm probably going to try to make a score in here, keying the 6 and the 7, try to get some other prices in as well. So that's the way I'm looking at this race.
Yeah, the 6 horse in my model is the 5th choice, 4th in my ensemble, and fair value is 8.5 to 1. The other horse you mentioned, the 8 Karime Pass, or Quarami, however you say that.
Yeah.
8.6 to 1. So the 6th choice in my model. Witty is off the board if I were wagering, not a choice.
So Witty's but the other 2 are, right there.
Yep, there's value.
Yeah.
Yep, there's value. It's a great race for my model. I'm frothing at the mouth for this race to come on.
It's Bourbon 30. I'll have to give that one another look, because I'll probably definitely include it in my vertical plays, because this is a race I think you could get big scores, especially if Victory Achieved runs the race. This is a kind that could produce with the big field, 14 horses. Now there may be some scratches, but you don't get too many opportunities to play larger than a 12 horse field, and that 13th and 14th horse really make a big difference in the combinations and tries and supers. Yep. And you can really, catch a price if you can get the favorite off the board in a race like this.
Yep.
All right. Man. All right. So let's move on to the 9th race. The 9th race. This is a grade 2 Secretariat, 1 1/16 on the turf for 3-year-olds. I remember when this used to be a 1 1/4 race. But everything gets cut back in distance. Now it's 1 1/16. Probably makes for a bigger, more competitive field, because a lot of horses don't like going 1 1/4. This is one where we might have the biggest favorite in the sequence, the 9 horse Alpeland, who been really impressive the last couple of races. Does draw the outside post in here, is spotting a little weight. Doesn't have numbers that necessarily lay over the field. What's the model say about the 9? Does it see anything else in here beyond the 9?
Yeah, the 9 is by far, well, I mean, it's 2.5 to 1 per my model, but there's a couple other horses that the model likes. Specifically the 3-horse supercharger at fair value on that horse is 2.8 to 1 per my model. And it's, in terms of like form, it's the top choice. So yeah, that 3-horse, and also the 2-horse conducted at 3.5 to 1 against a morning line of 6 to 1. Those are probably the 3 horses that I would focus on. And when I'm looking at my sheet right here, probably only the 3 horses I would include in any type of wagering here. Everything else is, more expensive than what the morning line indicates. So I would focus on those 3, maybe the 7, but probably those 3. Those are the top 3 choices in my model, and far above any other choice in terms of my win percentages.
But it sounded like the 2, 3, and 9 were all pretty close on your line.
They are. So
really, the 2 and the 3 would be, especially the 2 would be, the best value by far, right?
Absolutely. I would, I guess what you have to worry about on the 2, and this is something that my model is not great at, is horses that are coming. I always have to look at how many days they're coming off. Coming off a layoff, right? Because according to my sheet, it's the horse hasn't raced in 274 days. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Plus, it's got a new trainer, I think. So,
yep,
a lot of changes.
Yep, a lot of changes, but there is value there. There certainly is value there. But what I have noticed is is that feature itself, how the time between races is not something that the model does well with, right? It just thinks that every horse is, coming off a similar type,
right?
Sequence, right? So
yeah, 20 years ago, that would have been a really bad assumption. But nowadays, coming off layoffs, especially at stakes level horses, really doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of fitness. These trainers are pretty good at getting horses ready, especially for like a turf route where they're not running hard the whole race. Typically, they're just running the last part. So I think that's not bad. The other element to it, though, that you need to factor in with younger horses is, they develop physically over that layoff time. So if they are fit and ready to run their best off the layoff, typically they're going to actually be faster than they were before the layoff. A lot of times they're not dead fit, so they probably still have room to improve after that first race, and that's what that angle is one of the strongest angles that I talk about as a golden pattern.
I was about to ask that.
The second after the layoff. Yep. And that's what it's all built around, that assumption that most horses, young developing horses, develop over a long layoff, and they're better, faster horses when they come back. They're just not necessarily 100% fit. That all depends on the trainer and the horse. And, sometimes they come back ready to run their best, but usually they've got a better race in them. And they get a little fitter after that first off the layoff. And it's that second, sometimes the third, depending on what happens in the second, they might have trouble or something. That's where you see that kind of career best effort. And a lot of times you get paid off in terms of value because people aren't projecting, accurately projecting kind of what that improvement would be. So that's an angle I've always liked to play.
Okay.
So getting back to this race, I do have a couple of opinions that on horses that you haven't mentioned. One is similar. It's the other layoff horse in the race, the 6-horse Infiltrate, kind of like Conducted, but Infiltrate's never been on the turf. Was good on the dirt, was going to run on the turf in its last third and final start as a 2-year-old, but it got washed off and it ran on a sloppy track instead. But it's bred to run on the turf, very well bred to run on the turf. Should be better on turf than dirt. they were already trying to get it onto the turf last year. So I think the fact they're bringing it back in a turf race is a really positive sign. The barn's certainly capable of getting them ready off a layoff, but like I said, you're never really sure. You got to factor that in. There's more uncertainty around it. But to me, that horse is, capable of maybe even more upside than like a conducted, because it's never really been able to run. If turf is its preferred surface, I'm guessing it might be. It's never had that opportunity to run. This will be the first time, and it's developed quite a bit over the layoff, if hopefully. So both of those things happen. A lot of
good works in there too.
Yeah,
a lot of good works in there.
Yeah, a lot. It's been trained up to the race well. A lot of upside. Those are the kind of horses I'm always looking for. A horse that could, really pop a big race. So there's always more uncertainty. So you're looking for a price, but those are the kind that can really outrun their odds if, the horse really is plus turf, it's ready to run off the layoff, and it's developed as you would expect, from 2 to 3, it could run a big race in here. So that's the kind I'm always looking for. 10 to 1. I have that horse at that's a lot of value if it were to go off at that price. So that's kind of my main lean in here. The other one I kind of like is the 4 Fuzzbuster, whose first effort on turf was a sprint race in its 3-year-old debut. To me, that looked kind of like a prep. It's clearly better routing, but its turf effort wasn't bad. I mean, it ran as well on turf as it runs on dirt, and then it came back and ran well in an off the turf race that went in the slop. But again, they were trying to keep the horse on the turf, and now it is on the turf, and it's in good form. That last number it ran, it's hard to trust any number in the slop, but speed figure was good. You would think it's shown it can handle the turf. It's got a good post. That to me, Johnny V gets the mount. That's a nice rider upgrade. So to me, again, that's one that might get overlooked because all it has is a maiden win in the slop. But I think it might be capable of competing at this level. And so then, that's one I'm interested in. I'm a little surprised the morning line's only 8 to 1 on that horse. That shocks me. I have a feeling that's a bad morning line. I think I'd be really shocked if that horse isn't at least double-digit odds. So that's what I'm counting on.
Yeah. So this is a horse, the 4, that has the best collateral form in my model. It's the only horse that has an improving signal in my model. So it's probably something I would look at. And not only that, like the other thing that I like to look at is where my model's fair value is far off from the morning line. If I have this horse as the 6th choice and at 15 to 1 fair odds, right? But when I look at that on my sheet and then I look at the collateral form, I tend to think that there's something missing. There's something missing from what I gather and what my model predicts. So it would be something that I would probably throw in there. So yeah, that 4 is interesting. I'm going to write that one down.
Yeah, we had talked about Chip Honcho in the Jim Dandy. Well, this horse ran against Chip Honcho twice and was only beaten a neck by him in one race, sprinting, and then routing. He ran third to him in the mud. So, he was running against some pretty good horses on the dirt. And like I said, the one turf effort doesn't, they've been making an effort as a 3-year-old to get this horse on the turf, and it has turf breeding. So you would think it could be better on the turf, and it's in good form. So yeah, that's exactly, I think that,
and it's also in the top 3 speeds in my own speed figures that I developed. So yeah, I can see that. I could see that line moving more towards where do you have that fair value, Chris?
I have about 6 to 1 on that horse. So
got it. Okay.
but he and Infiltrate, I think, and like I said, I think the morning line is wrong on that one. I don't think that horse is going to be as short as 8-1. I just don't see it off of just a one maiden win. And that wasn't even on the turf. So I'd just be really surprised if that horse is 8-1. It's not like it's coming with connections. Vicky Oliver is not the kind of trainer that's going to get bet.
Exactly.
So, don't get that morning line at all. So I'm hoping it's wrong. Because those are the two that I'll be leaning on. Supercharger, there seems like there's a lot of pace in here on the outside. So it does seem like, but you never know. Sometimes the trainers and the riders read the form and they all decide to grab and somebody gets an easy lead. So you can't necessarily count on that. But Supercharger definitely can close, but it's definitely gotten really nice setups in the last couple races and might get it again. If it does, wouldn't shock me at all to see that horse win. But to me, he'll probably still be an underlay just because I always am kind of just inherently against horses that get setups in 2 straight races. But in this case, it looks like he might get another setup. So, I don't want to be too quick to dismiss its chances. But for me, the 4 and the 6 are where I would be focusing my play on this one.
That's right. Okay.
Anything else on this one before we move on to the next?
I think that's it.
All right, we'll go to the 10th, the Beverly D Stakes, a grade 2, 1 mile and 3/16 on the turf for fillies and mares 3-year-olds old and up. This race, the favorites will probably be either Stellify, horse that was really good last year but has not run yet this year, trained by Brad Cox, or probably Give Me Another, who's been really solid. I think her morning line's probably a little too high. I have a feeling those two will be the strong favorites in the windows. I'm not sure who will be favored, but I think it'll be much closer than the morning line would indicate. What does your model say about those two? Is it like anything beyond those two?
So Give Me Another. The data is, like I don't have enough data in there on that horse. But the model does like Stellify. It likes the 7 horse Pinup Betty. And the other choice that it likes in here at a price is the 5 horse Crevel d'Oro. So those are the top 3 choices in my model. And yeah, I think, another great betting race here. I think you can get some prices in here from the looks of it. And, I see value in the 10 horse against the morning line. And then, that's it. The 10, the 5, the 8, and the 7 are probably the choices that I would make in any of my kind of sequences there.
Yeah, I'm kind of with the model on this one. I really like the 5, Crevel d'Oro, who 12-1 on the morning line. She's just been stuck behind just some really bad, possibly slow pace in her last race. And her 2 races at Gulfstream before that were really good. That Pegasus filly and mare turf where she ran second, she was hung really wide in that race.
Right.
So I think she's better than her form would indicate. And she gets a good post in here. She gets Paco Lopez to ride. And, I don't think she's going to get that extremely slow pace that she got last time. I don't think she's going to get hung wide like she was the time before. And her best efforts definitely can win in here. So at double-digit odds, if that holds up, to me, that's pretty easy play for me. I would say she's as likely to win as anybody, and I'd probably put her about even on my line with Stellify. Stellify, is a question off the layoff, and this could, she's probably better going longer than this. So, this could be more of a prep, and, she might be ready for a longer race next time out. So, I think she's vulnerable at this distance and Crevel d'Oro could certainly beat her. And then the other horse I thought there was a little bit of value was also Pinup Betty, who, it's been a little disappointing this year, but it seems like her last race wasn't bad. And she kind of fits in here, but I really like Crevel Doro. That's who I would be the most interested in this race.
It's funny that the 5 and the 8 you mentioned, they have kind of even chances in here. The model says the same exact thing. Both of them at 2.8 to 1.
So it's real easy to figure out who to bet, right? One of them's going to be 5 to 2, and the other one might be 4 times that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Those are the horses you want to bet, right? If you're right, it's big if they really are about the same in terms of chances of winning, and one's 3 or 4 times the price of the other, then that's pretty obvious, how you want to play the race.
100%. So that's where I would probably lean on the 5, just like you.
Yeah, same here. And then again, this is one where I wouldn't bet her to place, but I might have her run an exact underneath Stellify and a couple other horses like Pinup Betty. If I do run second, don't get a wide trip where they go slow and she kind of does what she's done in her last couple, or she doesn't quite get the job done. I could, rather than a place bet, I would have the exacta, and those would still pay pretty good with her having double-digit price.
Right.
And I could be, hooking her up in doubles back to Infiltrate and Fuzzbuster, and maybe in a pick 3 all the way back to Witty and Victory Achieved. There's this sequence of 3 races. I like all 3 of them. So
yeah,
I can be making
prices,
some plays. Right? Yeah, I could be firing on this sequence. Yeah.
All right. I haven't heard that. I mean, I think last weekend you were like, I don't know, how many races did you bet last weekend?
Well, I only really seriously
I know
bet
you
a
had
couple.
your book signing, so
yeah,
exactly.
But that actually helped me, because on Thursday I was busy at the book signing until the end of the day, and then I caught the 27 to 1 shot at the end of the day. Just crushed that race, so I was set for the whole weekend.
Yeah,
so
I think
that's the way to do it.
That's good discipline, Yeah, that's good discipline, because typically if I'm there and I'm looking at a board, it's hard for me to lay off.
Well, yeah, but for me, it's not at home. It is, because I'm at home. I'm betting. When I go to Saratoga, the one time I'm going to be there this year, it's perfect weather. I like to just go and enjoy the track, right? Go to the paddock, go to the rail, chat with the people I haven't seen for a long time. So, just getting that whole racing experience, because I can bet on them every day. I just not at Saratoga every day. It's actually a lot easier for me to, be selective about betting when I'm at the track than when I'm at home just firing away, because that's all I'm doing, right, is betting. There's nothing to do. There's like the difference between you and me, because like I will only wager when I'm at the track, right? I will only wager when I'm at the track. Well, there's 2 reasons for that. Number 1, I live in Texas, so I have to be at the track, unless I'm VPNing somewhere, which I don't do. You would never do that.
And well, for me, it's I look at it this way, it's my golf membership. It's my going to the basketball game. It's, it's the ticket the price I pay for my entertainment, right? It's not, I need to be there to wager, basically. Now I'll enter contests and all those things, I just started, within the last year entering these handicapping contests, but I like to be at I do like to be at the track, and it also, limits the wagering that I will do. And I don't know. It's two different approaches.
I'm going to guess that they've got to know you at Sam Houston, though.
Yeah, there's I'm probably, I'm in my 40s, so I probably bring the average age down at Sam Houston by about 20 years, but yeah. Shout out to all my
probably
Houston buddies.
You probably aren't chatting to them about your quad models.
Well, I mean, there's a couple people who've come over and kind of, asked, how I'm, what I'm doing, but there's a lot of sharp guys at Sam Houston, and I've probably picked up more knowledge from those guys than they've picked up, for sure, than they've picked up from me. Like that's the the thing that I talked to you about, Chris. It's like there's an art and between the sciences here. You know what I mean? And I think guys like me, picking up knowledge from guys like you and the guys that I met at the track is, that's how you move from just kind of crunching numbers to having some nuance in your wagering, right?
I totally agree. Yeah, and that domain knowledge for modelers is underrated.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
And I mean, I've done modeling for a long time, and that domain knowledge. It's one thing to model the numbers, but it makes a huge difference if you kind of understand what the numbers represent. So,
absolutely, and like you can bring in, we bring in these, these quants from all these, high-end schools into my company, right? And if they don't have the guy that's sat in the market for 20 years, whatever they come up with, it might look fancy and it might have, there might be some kind of signal that they can grab, but without that guy who's been there for 15 years, intimately trading a market, knowing the participants, there's no edge, right? And the edge, this is the whole thing with any of this stuff, and which is something that I'll tell anyone. AI can only take you so far. There's a human element to everything that we do, and there will always be the artistic edge of a human being that will outperform any machine, and I truly believe that. So that's
I've been trying to say that that's true even today. The man versus machine, the parimutuel pools. You can still find your edges, even if you're the old-fashioned human. I still,
for sure,
I still have been successful, continue to be successful. I use some. I approach it completely different than I used to, but there's still places where you can outperform any model if you're patient and selective and you play to your strengths, right?
Totally.
All right, so let's go to the final. It's not actually the final race in the card, but it's the final leg of this sequence of stakes races. It's the big one, the Arlington Million. It got that name back when $1 million meant something as a purse. That was a big deal. It's still a lot of money, but it's not quite what it once was. In this race, we've got another kind of clear favorite in Burnham Square. Everyone seems to feel like this is the best turf router in the U.S. right now. Kind of cutting back some in distance. I think maybe this horse's superpower is going longer, so it might be a little kryptonite in the cutback to 1.25 miles, which is still long, especially for the U.S. horses. Is a Burnham Square, a stone cold single in here, or you think he's got some competition? If so, who would that be?
Fourth choice in my model is Burnham Square.
The fourth choice. Wow.
The fourth choice.
Wow.
The fourth choice. Yeah. So the top choice is Integration, followed by Test Score, and then Gran Oriente, with Burnham Square sitting at fair value for my model at 8.5 to 1. So I'm sure that surprises a bunch of people.
Your model is fading him. So if that's right, fading him, you can make a lot of money. You don't have to be real sharp after that if you can fade him off the board like that. So Integration. I'm not surprised the model would pick a horse named Integration. Where does he have him at fair value? Is he offering any value on your line, or is he about fair value?
Yeah, it's double the value. So like at the morning line, 4 to 1, even a little more than that. My fair value here is 1.6 to 1.
Now, I've always been an Integration fan. He's been a little disappointing. He doesn't ever seem to quite get the job done at the grade 1 level. He Last year, I think he had an excuse. He got hung wide. He got beat by the 3-horse Fort Washington in this race, Fort Washington last year. So, a lot of people will kind of laugh at your model when it picks him because he never wins these big races. But I can see how the model would pick him and how, 3 or 4 races when you run second, to judge a horse off that small sample size can be, really misleading. So, I definitely could see Integration winning this race. I don't have him at 2-1 on my line, but he certainly fits. If he gets a good trip, and he's run well at Colonial Downs before too. He's run some good races there.
Yep. There is some, there is something in that, in the model that does favor horses that have run at tracks, that gives them a little more edge, right? So there's definitely something to that. But
especially
in this race,
a track like Colonial, which is a little bit different than a lot of other tracks.
It's a little wonky, right? Yeah. But I would probably try to beat the favorite here. I think.
Yeah.
So like
based on your line, you'd have to. Yeah.
Yeah, between Test Score, Integration, and Grand Oriente, those are probably 3 horses that I would bet in any, and I'd probably leave. I'd probably try to, like I said, try to beat the 5.
Yeah.
I will say this.
Go ahead.
What is the line on the 5?
On the 6, on the 6 and the 8, Test Score and Grand Oriente, the other 2.
Yeah, so Test Score is at 2.5-1 in my model. Grand Oriente is at 6.8-1.
So Test Score is really strongly. So those Test Score and Integration
right. So
are both.
So there is a discrepancy here between those. Between the 2 models, and I run 2 different models that form an ensemble. So the ensemble number 1 pick is Integration, but the other, so it's the number 1 pick in one model, and then Test Score is the number 1 pick in the other model. So like your traditional, conditional logic model, which is what Bob Benter ran, that's where Test Score is my number 1 pick. And, roughly when you look at their total kind of score figure, like what I consider kind of like my Ragzin number, Test Score is actually the number 1 choice in here.
And he, price-wise, are about the same. So he and Integration are clearly where you'd want to focus in on probably in this race based on your line.
Right. That's
and
where
fades
I focus.
Burnham Square. Now it's interesting that your model picks Grand Oriente because that's the horse I love in here. And it's kind of a harder. Well, I guess he's had enough races in the U.S. where it's not that hard to pick him. But what I love about this horse is he was a absolute route horse. I mean, marathon type. All his last 6 starts as in Chile, where he ran before he came to the U.S., were all at 1.25 miles or longer. And his best race ever was he won, grade 1 race at 1.25 miles his last start in Chile, the Club Hípico de Santiago Falbella. And I think that was
that perfectly.
Yeah, I think that was a Breeders' Cup win and you're in because his next start was in the U.S. 4 or 5 months later in the Breeders' Cup Mile, which was way too short for him. And if you watch the race, he lost all chance at the start, but he didn't really run that bad after that. And that, like I said, was too short for him. But for some reason, they left him in the U.S. and the trainer, this is a 1.25 mile horse. They kept sprinting him, and he actually won down the hill at Santa Anita. He beat Speedboat Beach, who's a pretty good horse that Bob Baffert trains. But, where he got better is not surprising when they put him back around 2 turns. He beat some decent horses at Santa Anita, including Cabo Spirit, who just ran a really big race last weekend out at Santa Anita. And then he shipped to and joined Sanford Joseph's barn at Gulfstream, and his 2 races there have been really impressive. If you watch him, he's just got push button acceleration. And again, he really hasn't gotten into his wheelhouse, which is going longer. But I think this is a really smart placement by Safi to put him at this 1.25 miles as a grade 1. He's a Group 1 winner in Chile, but that's not quite the same as his grade 1 winner in the U.S. But he seems capable of winning if you watch him, and I think he's going to finish up strong. He gets Paco in the irons. I really like him in here. Safi's been doing really good shipping horses around the country this year. And, this horse could get overlooked coming from Gulfstream, 10-1. I'd love to see that price. I think I have more respect than your model does for Burnham Square. I do think he's the one to beat, but I think at this distance, Gran Oriente can beat him. I think he's the one horse that's we don't know how good he is. The rest of them, we all know what we got. Gran Oriente is the one horse that we have never seen him run in the U.S. at 1.25 miles, and I think that is in his wheelhouse, and he's looked pretty good going shorter. And he's got enough speed where he can get a good position early, but he can switch off. He switches off really well, but he really responds once the rider asks him. And when he does respond, he has a really nice kick. So I'm really high on Gran Oriente. I really like him. And he's kind of the tail end of the sequence, but I really like all 4 races in the sequence. If I'm hoping that the odds hold up, and this could, and I'm right about some of these opinions. It could be a pretty good day. It'd be a good day for betting, I think.
Yeah, a lot of fun, man. A lot of fun on these races. The other question I had in this race was the 7 horse. Do you have any?
Well, he's scratching. I should have mentioned.
Oh, okay.
He's going to scratch.
Okay.
There was a day's racing for him. I think there's a race at Ellis Park or somewhere else, but he will not go. So I thought he was a contender if he had, but we don't have. He will be out. So that's one less post position that Gran Oriente has to worry about getting over to save ground. But there's a good run to the first turn in this race. Actually, I think they sort of almost start on the turns like a little shoot, but I think it shouldn't be any problem for him to get a good spot because he has enough positional speed so they can put him wherever they want him. There's other horses that want to be forward, and then there's some that really want to drop back, and I think he'll be able to sit kind of mid-pack and make his move and get the jump on the other closers. And I don't think he'll have a problem running down the horses in front of him if he runs the way he has in his previous races.
There we go.
All right. So anything else on that? Is there any others before we finish up? Any other race on either card that your model says is, I know that it kind of pumps out what are maybe some really good races or plays? Is there something that stands out?
I'm looking at both cards here. There's really, let's see, the 7th race at Saratoga. The model really likes. The model doesn't really like it, but it's it's more like my form kind of numbers, and that's the 5 horse in the 7th race as value.
Hold on a minute, let me pull that up. So the 5 horse, that's Sharp Spark. That the name of the horse?
This is the.
Oh, okay.
No, sorry,
I got the wrong card. Hold on a second.
It's called
jumping around.
The horse's name is Statesman.
Okay, he's 10-1 on the morning line. Yeah.
Yep. Likes that horse for form reasons. Let's see what else is highlighted in here that actually has a price. Let's see down here. I guess. The 9th race is it's at Colonial. That's your Fuzzbuster. That's your choice, right?
The 9th race at Colonial. Hold on a second. Yeah, Fuzzbuster. That was who I was talking up. That one, right? Infiltrate.
Yep. But I've only run kind of like this first pass, at the model. So, when I do the kind of like the full run on Saturday, I should have some better choices in here. But yeah, that's really about it. I can go race by race here, and that's kind of the great part about running my system is that it takes about an hour to run when I when I upload and scrape all the PPs. So like, I can look at any race, after that run and it's already, kind of handicap for me. So makes going to any track kind of quite easy. Right. And I've also got like other kind of, the other part about, modeling everything, right, and working with these, and working with these harnesses is that, part of these harnesses are things called skills that you build. And the skills that you build, are kind of like the definitions that you want for any kind of particular kind of sequence, right? So like I've got skills built for pick fives, I got skills built for pick threes, I've got skills built for, tries, exactas, all those things. So that's separate from my modeling. And that will give me kind of like a, what sequences to look for kind of thing for any of these tracks on any given day. It's a separate thing that I run. If I'm going to the track, I'll invoke one of these skills and have it kind of spit out what I should look for, where there's, where are the chaotic races where, I can get a price, that kind of thing. But I only kind of run that on a ad hoc basis when, I'm going to the track. Right. And, but it gives me, just kind of like, like, okay, look closer at this race type of thing, which I haven't run for these tracks yet. But, when I do, I'm sure I'll have some other opinions in here.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure the listeners will appreciate it. And it shows that if you come to it with the right mindset, the right skill set, you use the right tools, you can really get engaged and have some early success, even in today's challenging environment. So especially the younger players out there, or the tech savvy players, there's a path. There's a path that you can take.
Yeah, and this is the other thing that we talked about. And this is something that I think if you're listening out there, Equibase, if you're listening out there, Daily Racing Form, if you're listening out there, any data provider, give us the APIs. Give us APIs for all this data. We're way behind. Horse racing is way behind. And people like me, people that are, that are interested in this stuff, you're going to get a whole cohort of people building stuff like I'm building. And, once this data is really accessible, right? I mean, I'm sure half the people listening to this are like, what the hell is an API? But it's basically just direct access to the databases and that all these, that Equibase has. I know they're working on it. I've sent them emails.
Well, supposedly Naira is working on something, and we've had the promises, and so maybe it will actually happen. I'm not sure what will be in it, but it'll be a first step in that direction. Because you're certainly not the first person that has brought this up, but I'm glad you did, because it really has become a barrier to, getting some players with your, the kind of player like you who become highly engaged quickly. It's a big barrier for them to really get started.
Yeah. And once they have these APIs built in, you are going to get a proliferation of tools for the horse player that, that will be most likely free tools, that people are just making on their own. But it'll be so much easier for the general public to, go into any of these AI harnesses and pull the APIs from, pull data from anything and build your own thing. Right. And there can be a lot of innovation here in handicapping and and engagement with, a younger generation if they just move forward with these kind of data plans. So I'm hopeful that happens soon. I think it will, honestly. Like in talking with Equibase, it seemed like they're gonna, they're on track to have, to have direct APIs. So fingers crossed, man. But
yeah, I can tell
thanks for having
you've
me,
only
Chris.
been in this game for a couple of years. You're still optimistic, but yeah, I applaud your optimism. I'm not holding my breath, but even a baby sip will be appreciated. So let's hope.
sure.
We can hope. It does seem like maybe there's a possibility that we could be making some progress on that front, but I'm gonna wait and see. But I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
Well, and I also want to say one thing. Like, if anybody has any kind of feedback, or would like to look at the dashboards that I've created, hit me up on Twitter.
What's your handle?
I'm at Dino Ferrandino. So DinoFerrandino, and I've got some spots on my distribution list. I don't want to pay for any more. Like I route everything through Cloudflare, and once you get to a certain number of users, you have to pay for them. So I've got some spots there for people that want to provide feedback. But yeah, hit me up there if you're interested in having a look at my dashboard.
All right, great. Well, with that, we will wrap things up. Thanks again, Mark, for joining me today, and of course to all the listeners out there. That'll conclude show number 372 of the Sport of Kings podcast. Good luck this weekend, and please enjoy the Brooklyn Boogaloo Blowout. Cheers. That's a wrap.
All right.